Hey, good evening. It's Dr. Song. Welcome to another episode of Coronavirus from the Front Line in New Jersey. And I'm going to begin today again with some statistics. And I have to say that today's numbers are not looking very good. We had an increase in number of cases. The total cases was 68,824. That's up from yesterday by over 4,000 new cases. Now that we can kind of understand because there's probably more tests, okay? More people are being tested, so it would make sense that more positive test results. Since more tests are being done, that makes sense. So I'm not too worried about that number, but I'm more concerned right now about this 2,805 deaths. So that is 362 people died in New Jersey overnight. And unfortunately, folks, it looks like that number has gone up compared to yesterday. So if you look at yesterday, we only had 93 deaths. So we're hoping that it was a trend. It still can be. Today, you can't just look at one day. But just like we couldn't look at that one day yesterday and say for sure that it was leveling off, we can look at today's number. There could have been a lot of different factors. But unfortunately, the numbers today went up a little bit. So we do need to be kind of prepared for this going on for a while. Okay, so those are the numbers. And today I wanted to talk about testing. Speaking of testing, so I'm just gonna get this off the screen here. And a lot of people are asking about testing because as you know, testing has been an issue. There's been issues with getting enough tests available, and being able to, when you have, even though the test is available, we're not always able. There we go. So the testing is available, but not in anywhere near what it needs to be. So here's what's going on with the testing. So what's primarily being done are the swabs. So they're doing the nasal swabs where they're taking a swab, sticking it up into the nose, and trying to get some samples of the virus. Now that is going to be the best way to find active virus, so that if there's virus, it's going to be the highest concentration is right in the back of your nose. So that's what we're trying to do, is take that swab and get that virus from the back of your nose. So that is called a PCR test. They're taking actual virus and they're going to amplify that using like a DNA test to find the presence of the actual virus. Now, there's another type of test that's available, and this test is called an antibody test. And I'm gonna just share the screen with you again. And okay, so with the antibody test, well, this is the swab that I was talking about. Now, with the antibody test, we have, it looks kind of like a pregnancy test, okay? So basically, you're gonna take a drop of blood, and you can do that with a finger stick and with a little finger prick and put it in there. And then you wait 15 minutes. So you don't have to wait several days to get the results of this test. In 15 minutes, you'll have results. So if you look at these, if you look here, The C stands for control, okay? So that's to check the validity of this test. If you don't get a red line at the C, that means this kit is no good, okay? So that's what the C is for. What you really want to look at to see the result is the T. So when you're looking at here, see right here it says IgM, and this one says IgG, okay? So what the IgM is, your body makes antibodies. So what this is measuring, it's not measuring the virus directly, it's measuring your body's response to the virus. So when you get infected, your body makes antibodies to help your immune system fight off the virus. The first type of antibodies that are made are the IgM antibodies. Now, this test will take longer to be positive. You can be sick and have the virus in you, and this test could be completely negative because you won't get the results, any kind of positive results, until your body mounts a response. So this is gonna lag behind. So if you're trying to find somebody who was just infected, the nasal swab is going to be the best, even though there's false negatives with this too. The problems with this is sometimes they don't get the swab all the way back there and just take it from the front of the nose, and you'll miss the big viral load back here. And also, if the viral load is so small, it might not detect it either. So there's some false negatives. False negatives is a problem with all these tests. But this is going to give you the quickest, this is going to give you the earliest results. Okay, so somebody who's recently infected, this would be the best test. And at this point, this one is considered the most reliable. But let's go back to this test. The importance of this is it's what we call point of care. That means you get the results right there in 15 minutes. So, so there's a lot of controversy going on about this test because this is going to be very useful. But right now, the test, the FDA doesn't know what to do with this right now because we have these. They're sitting in customs. We have a lot of different companies that make it. Most of them are overseas. There's a company in the States that's making it too. But the FDA is not allowing these tests to be released at this point because they're concerned about the reliability of these tests, although these are the same kits that are being used overseas. My feeling is that something is better than nothing, but we do have to really we have to use these things properly, okay? There was even talk about having these made into a home test, like a pregnancy test, so people can test themselves. But because of the problems with the false negatives, they felt that that was not a wise thing to do. Although at some point, I think when everything settles down, it would be most useful if it was available as a home test. So let's just get back to this again. I talked about the IgM, that's the first one. So when the IgM is positive, that means you're actively infected, okay? Later on, this other one, IgG, your body makes IgG, that's a different type of antibody. That IgG is the antibody that sticks around, and the IgM will go away as you get better, and the IgG will stick around so that it can remember the virus if it ever attacks you again. And that's what is an indicator, a possible indicator of immunity, because IgG, the presence of the IgG could mean that you're immune. A lot of viral diseases like hepatitis, if you find the IgG antibody, that's a good indicator that you're immune. So in this one here, you can see you're starting to see a red here on the test part. This one is the control. So if you see the red here and not here, that means this patient was previously infected and has made antibody. So it could mean that they're immune. Now here's the thing. There's also unfortunately, with these things, there are counterfeiters trying to make a buck on this. So that's the other concern that the FDA has by releasing these. They're afraid that counterfeit test kits are going to be released, and the doctors performing the tests are maybe unwittingly giving inaccurate results because of this test. But now we have to weigh that against the emergency of the situation. We are in a situation that is unprecedented. This thing has hit us so quickly and so widely that and unfortunately we were totally unprepared, and that's a whole nother story. But it is what it is. We're unprepared. We have these tests. They're sitting in customs. There are a bunch of different companies. I've been talking to a few of these companies, and there's a lot of craziness going on. Okay, I had initially placed an order for some of these test kits, and the first ones that were supposed to be available, and they were quite expensive. It was hundreds of dollars for a test kit. But then others became available, and they were much cheaper. Okay, so the cost to the doctor can be anything from $10 to $200. So that's the kind of craziness that we're dealing with. And at this point, we don't even know if the $10 kits are may be better than the $200 kits. So the only way that we're going to really be able to tell the validity of these kits, if we're going to use the ones that are coming in from overseas, is we have to compare them to the PCR test, the nasal swabs that we're doing. So we're not going to be able to use these as a diagnostic tool right away because we don't know the validity. So what I'm going to do, and a bunch of my colleagues have decided to do, we have doctors around the country that have been following this, and we've been talking about it every week. So what we're going to do is we're going to each get order a bunch of these kits, and we're going to test people, but unfortunately, it's not going to be initially to diagnose you. What we're going to do is look for people that we know have been infected and have tested positive previously with the nasal swab test, people who were confirmed, and we're going to test those people first to see if these tests are going to correlate with the results that they have, and we'll test some people that we know are most likely to be negative. And then as we get more information back, we'll have some more a better understanding of which tests are reliable and which are not. But going forward, this is what's going to help us return our life to the way it was, because this is going to help tell if people are immune to this, or if they're susceptible, or if they're actively infected. Okay, so let me just explain this again. So if we look at the tests, okay, remember I said the C is for the control. Okay, so this test right here is no good. Okay, even though you have a line here, you don't have a line in the control. This is to check. So this should always be positive if the kit is good, and this one is not showing anything on the C. So we can't use this. We have to throw it away and use another kit. Okay. So this one, you see that there are two red lines on the C, on the control, which means this is a good test. And we have no red line on the test area. So this means that the test result is negative. Does not necessarily mean that the patient is not infected. Okay, because remember I said it takes several days for your body to make antibodies. So you can be infected, you can be shedding virus and infecting others and still have a negative test. And this is why the FDA does not want to make this a home test, because they don't want people to use this at home and have a false sense of security and think that they're negative and go spreading the virus when they may in fact be positive, and it just your body hasn't had enough time to make the antibodies. Okay, so let's skip over to this one here. And if we look at this, again, you look at the top ones first. The C, the controls are positive, so this is a good test. Now here, we have no line on the IgG, we have a line on the IgM. So that means the patient was recently infected. So they were infected probably at least a few days, but the IgM tells that they have been infected for at least a few days, enough for your body to make the IgM antibodies. The M is the first antibodies that your body makes to fight the virus. There's no IgG, okay? The IgG is negative here, which means that they haven't had the virus long enough for your body to start building a long-term immunity, okay? So this kind of tells you it's a more recent infection. This person needs to be quarantined, okay? This person has to be in strict isolation so that they don't pass it on to somebody else, okay? So now, as time goes on, this patient still has IgM, so it means that they're probably still infectious, but now they're starting to make some IgG, okay? These antibodies start coming on later, and these are the antibodies that will help the body remember the virus, okay? So now let's hop back over here. And this one, again, there's the controls are positive, so it's a good test, but the IgM is gone, okay? So what this tends to indicate is that this patient probably had the infection a while ago, and is not currently sick, although you can't take that as 100%, okay? But it's an indication that this patient had a more remote infection, but they have IgG, and this tells me that this patient was infected at some point, okay? And probably immune, hopefully immune to the virus. And that's really the big question, because we don't know. We don't know if we're going to build an immunity to this, and that's gonna mean a world of difference, because if we all build an immunity to it, then eventually we can just go back to our normal lives, and you may have some viruses cases popping up here and there, but most people will be immune. And what we talked about before, the herd immunity. So if most people are immune, then this is not going to be a problem. There was some disturbing news coming out of China that said that some people who were sick, there are some cases where some people were getting sick a second time. So that is disturbing news. So we have to watch that carefully to see if that's just some isolated cases, or that's the way it's going to be with the virus. So these are the antibody tests that we're talking about. These tests are not. This is not probably, you're not going to be able to get this test right now at your doctor's office. Because the FDA is not allowing us to use these. You're going to be able, this is the test you're going to get. This is going to tell if you're infected currently and shedding virus, okay? So if you're shedding virus, you're still infected. Now this test will be negative. This test will be negative once you're better and you stop shedding virus, because this only checks the presence of the virus. And if you have a negative test, it does not tell you if you have been infected in the past, or if you have antibodies. So this test is very useful right now for identifying people who are sick and infectious. And this is called a PCR test, polymerase chain reaction test, which checks for the presence of the actual virus. But this is a more complicated test, and that's why it takes a while for the results to come back. And this is the test that we're going to compare this to. So, so as we hopefully by next week, because we were supposed to have these tests a couple weeks ago, but they're still being held up in customs. They're talking about only allowing this to be done in a laboratory setting, which defeats the whole purpose of having a point of care test. So, so this is what we're watching for. We're also watching the numbers. Okay, we're watching to see if we're at a peak, because as everybody is very anxious to find out when we're going to come out of this social distancing and isolation. And so far, although today's numbers did not look great, we're hoping that this will peak out, and then we can start to think about getting back to normal. So that's the news for today. Hoping tomorrow's news will be better, and just asking everybody to hang in there, and we're all in this together, and you guys are doing a great job with the social distancing, and I'll see you tomorrow.